with race. I think it has a lot to do with pathologies of culture that are negative, whether you're talking hillbilly elegy in J.D. Danis's book in Kentucky, or whether you're talking about the black community in South Central Los Angeles. So that said, the solutions are the same for everybody, right? And this is sort of the purpose of the speech. The solutions are the same for everybody. Don't have babies out of wedlock, go to school, get a job. The problem with affirmative action is it actually effectively does not allow people who benefit from affirmative action to go to schools where they can succeed. The dropout rate is significantly higher for affirmative action students. You're penalizing people based on their race, because the fact is that Colin Powell's kid benefits from affirmative action, but some poor schlub living in West Virginia who grows up really poor, and is white, that guy is being pushed out for Colin Powell's kid. You can't do it on the basis of color. And beyond that, if you actually want to create workable solutions, then hard work is the only way to do that. Now, one of the problems that we have in the United States now is that because we have so much information at our fingertips about how everybody else is doing in life, we all expect to rise to become Bill Gates in one generation. That's not how wealth works. The reality is that for pretty much everybody in this room, your grandparents were probably poorer than you are. And that's been true throughout human history. And when people grow up poor and then immediately want to be making and start in a worse situation than someone else, the immediate idea is something unfair has happened. Well, something unfair has happened, but that's not correctable by government. In the end, the keys to solving things in high-crime black areas, for example, is you need more cops to police the crime and get the criminals out of the community. You need parents who are going to do a better job of focusing on making sure that their kids have a solid education. That means stop incentivizing single motherhood on the state and federal governmental level. And it also means that, and I think part of this is solved by the crime problem, there are not enough jobs in those communities because who wants to locate their business in a place where there's a riot every few years, right? If you want to locate your business where it's safe, you're not going to get broken into. Putting cops in a high-crime community is a great way of ensuring that businesses move in, providing jobs and economic growth, and that will actually create tax revenue necessary to generate a decent public school system. So all of these things are solvable, but they start with individual decent behavior, and the government actually doing what the government is supposed to do, which is stop people from violating other people's rights. If you do those two things, decent behavior, have the government stop people from violating people's rights, that's the basis for all success regardless of the community.
Is one more question, Nick?
Yeah, it's quick.
All right, yeah, it's pretty quick. All right, so you know how, I guess we're in grade school and high school, we're told like an ideal version of history. And then in college, we get the more graphic version. Do you think that actually affects the way that people actually start to see like after a long time? Because on this campus,
well, I mean, what anybody learns, what anybody learns about history is going to bias them. There are a lot of Jews who still won't buy German cars because of the Holocaust. Right? Okay, well, it's 7 years later, it's okay to buy a German car. Right? The Germans who are alive now are not the Germans who were murdering your great-grandparents. The way that the focus on historic wrongs to the exclusion of the perfection of the American ideal is the problem on college campuses. If you are taught that the American ideal was founded, this is the basic differences in the view of history. So the sort of traditional view of American history is that America was founded with brilliant ideas that America did not live up to. And America has been a process of moving toward the realization of those ideas. In some ways, we've moved very much toward it with regard to the treatment of black people, the treatment of women, the treatment of gay people. In some ways, we've moved tremendously against it in terms of the growth of government. But the idea is that the ideals that the founders spelled out are the correct ones. Then there's the idea of the left, which is that those ideals are just a reflection of racism, sexism, bigotry, and homophobia. If that's your idea of American history, America is a country founded in sin, and the only way to overcome that sin is to disown the founding itself and overthrow the governmental ideological structure. And that's why you hate every aspect of American history. You have to read it all in the worst possible way, because it comes from a bad place.
Hey, been a big fan here. Read a lot of your stuff. And
Thank you.
I've noticed that you're for Citizens United. You don't want to do any restrictions on campaign contributions.
Yes.
And that's an argument I tend to agree with. But in light of all the information that's come out of the Democrats selling ambassadorships to the highest bidder, using the actual term quid pro quo, would you want to put any sort of limitations on giving campaign contributions in instances where you can actually prove it was for something? Or?
Well, I mean, if there's a quid pro quo, I think there should be legal limitations. I don't think you should be paying the government to do things for you. That's pretty corrupt. Unfortunately, it's been the habit of the U.S. government really since inception that rich people who donate lots of money get to be ambassador to Fiji, and then the unlucky guy gets to be the ambassador to Afghanistan. Corruption in government is endemic to a business where there's lots of money involved in the government itself. Not the kind of government that goes into election. Here's the truth. If government were small and did not matter to you, you would not be contributing money to political figures because they wouldn't be bothering you. right? I don't contribute money to the Texas state government, right? I don't get involved in Texas state races, really, because I don't live in Texas. You do. Presumably you don't get involved in California state races, because the people in California don't bother you, so what do you care? Right? If Washington didn't bother you, right? If Washington were small and didn't bother you, as former Governor Perry liked to say, if Washington, D.C. were insignificant in your life, nobody would be paying money to be involved with government. The reason that you have so much corruption is not because of the people who are attempting to corrupt government, but because government is just a giant corrupt cash bag, and if you get control of those levers, then you can steal some of that money for yourself. That's the problem. The problem is the size of government, not the size of the contributions. Because again, if government didn't do anything, no one would be contributing money to get all of it. If government were worthless, who wants a piece of it?
Thank you.
Okay. On your podcast, you talked about how the left is obsessed with backstory. I was kind of hoping you can speak to that. And my other question, I guess, well, my other point, I guess, is in your podcast as well, you talked about the dangers of subjective definition for freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like, you talked about the book that I think by Stephen James or something.
Oh, James Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah. You wrote a good book called Liberty, Equality, and Fraternity. One of the great kind of ignored quotes of the last 10 years in the United States, it's really an egregious quote. It's from President Obama's second inaugural, where he said, everybody in America, we don't even have to have the same definition of freedom. No, that's pretty much the one thing we do have to have the same definition. If your definition of freedom is stealing my crap, we've got a problem. And so what I say about liberty is when people say I believe in American exceptionalism, I want a definition of what you mean by that. When people say I believe in freedom, I want to know what do you mean by freedom. When you say I believe, when people say, Barack Obama wants what's best for the country, that doesn't mean anything to me. When they say he's a patriot because he wants what's best for the country, yeah, but what if his definition of what's best for the country is the opposite of mine? Like, I don't care that he wants what's best for the country. I assume that, they're not the same, that these have nothing to do with one another. But I assume that in his own way, Bin Laden wanted what was best for the United States. He wanted to be an Islamic Sharia law state, right? But that's not something I agree with. Didn't make him an American patriot. The patriotism to me is the idea that you stand up and believe in the founding ideals of the country. And those are expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. As far as the backstory question, I was talking about particularly kind of fiction and narrative on podcast at one point, and I was saying that the left to give every character a backstory. Backstory is the whole thing. And that, to me, is it's true in life also. Leftists are very obsessed with the idea that every time somebody does something bad, we have to delve into their past and figure out why they did the bad thing. Right? We always have to ask why. Okay, well, why is an important question, but a significantly more important question is what did they just do, and what is the punishment they should bear for that. The left mistakes sympathy for change of policy. Right? If you have sympathy for someone because they had a rough childhood, now we have to change the policy with regard to that person, and that's something I just don't buy.
Hi, Ben. The left has a strangle grip on the entertainment industry, and since you authored Primetime Propaganda, I wondered if you had a perspective on how conservatives take it back.
Okay, well, this is actually a really tough one. So conservatives tend to be like dolphins with regard to the entertainment industry. Dolphins sleep with half their brain on and half their brain off. So conservatives have a political side of our brain, and we have an entertainment side of our brain. When we are political, then we are super political, and when we are entertainment-oriented, then we don't want to hear anything about politics. So that means that when people come and they say, okay, we need to make entertainment product, we need to make conservative movies or movies that reflect conservative values, conservatives don't know which side of the brain to put it in. Because if they put it in their political side of the brain, they go, I don't like entertainment, the only movies I watch are Ronald Reagan biopics. and then at the end of the day, they go home and they watch Modern Family, just like everybody else in the United States. And they don't understand that for the left, there's no two sides of the brain, it's all the same. And so what the right needs to understand is that if they would stop sinking tens of millions of dollars into useless politicians and start sinking tens of millions of dollars into producing mass entertainment that young people watch, that would actually have more of an impact than you giving $1 million to a politician who's going to lose by 5%. It's just that money can be better used. I say this all the time to donors. Like, what is your expected return? Do you have any expected return on your political donations? And they say, well, the expected return is that we're going to win. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're probably not. So now what are you going to do with that money? So better investment to me would be start taking some of that money and pouring it into the talented people in Hollywood who want to push things that are not explicitly political, but that reflect basic values that are conservative.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. You stated that one of the big idea, instead of white privilege, is decision-making privilege.
language.
Yes.
And a lot of communities, especially disadvantaged communities and single-parent households, a lot of the youth they don't have the morals taught to them, the lessons taught to them in order to make well-informed decisions. We kind of touched on that in saying, we need to have parents who are decent people. Well, how do we actually bring that about? How do we have parents and society as a whole become more decent?
So the first thing is you actually have to get rid of the safety net for bad decisions. So one of the things that has happened is with the advent of the welfare state, before the advent of the welfare state, the single motherhood rate in the black community in 1960 was 20%. Today, 70% of black kids are born out of wedlock, which is an insane number. And it's rising in every community. And that's largely because people feel like if I can get away with a bad decision and somebody's going to pay me for the bad decision, why wouldn't I make a bad decision? You have to disincentivize the bad decision. And there has to be a renewal of the social stigma attached. And this is what the entertainment industry has done that's so wrong, is when they say every family is the same, every family is equal in quality. No, every family is not the same or equal in quality. It's just not true. We all know it from people that we know. And that's even true among parents in two-parent households, right? But on a generalized level, it's certainly true when you talk about two parents versus one-parent households. There are individual one-parent households that can be wonderful, and individual two-parent households that can be crap. But on a general level, it is better to have a two-parent household than to have a one-parent household. The entertainment industry has really sinned in this capacity and taught people an absolute falsehood about raising kids. So that's where we're going to have to fight back on that front. I think the churches are going to have to fight back. Churches have put an enormous amount of stock in not making people feel bad about themselves. You should feel inspired when you leave church. You should feel bad if you make a bad decision. I mean, religion was, the draw of religion is also the idea that when you do something, you bear the consequences of that, and there is such a thing as right and wrong. Eternal values are based on eternal right and wrong. So, it's about time that the preachers start telling their flock, particularly teenagers, that if you have a kid abandoned that kid, you're doing something wrong. And if you have sex out of wedlock, thinking the guy's going to marry you, think again, because the truth is that is extraordinarily, unfortunately in today's America, that's extraordinarily rare. The social institutions have completely collapsed, and government has tried to use a substitute. You can't use the government as a substitute. So it's a long haul. I mean, this is not a quick fix. But one of the things that's going to happen is people are going to have to start telling the truth about these things, even if it offends folks. I get so much blowback. I spoke at a high school in Otay Ranch, which is like San Diego, a very low-income high school. This is probably a year and a half ago. And I said all the things I'm saying right now about to a bunch of poor kids, what you can do to escape poverty. Do these things, and you won't live in permanent poverty. And the principal actually came down and stopped the speech in the middle to excuse the students because he was afraid too many students were being offended by me saying that you shouldn't have kids out of wedlock and they should make good decisions with your money. I was like, but that's exactly what they need to hear. They don't need to hear that their parents made great decisions if they're living in poverty. You need to learn when you're part of being an adult is recognizing that your parents aren't perfect and trying to correct the mistakes that you see your parents make. And if we all have a stake in not hurting feelings, it's going to be very difficult to make society a better place for anyone.
Thank you.
Hi. I feel like the way you're talking about societal policing of transgender bodies violates the principle of conservatism and just leaving people alone. So I guess microaggressions aside, because I don't really subscribe to that term either, why do you care so much about the way somebody chooses to identify?
I don't care at all. I do care about what they force me to say about it.
Okay.
That's the answer. If you want to go ahead and do that, if you want to have surgery on yourself, I could not care less. If you want to dress how you want to dress, I really don't care. But if the idea is that I am supposed to now blind myself to reality and pretend in front of my children that a man is a woman or a woman is a man, or that it is healthy for a man who thinks he's a woman to get a surgery, that I'm not willing to do. You're demanding something of me. I'm not demanding anything of you if you're a transgender person, but you're demanding something of me if you expect me to change my view of reality based on your subjective view of yourself. So
if your view of reality changes due to, I guess, could it ever change due to new scientific evidence supporting?
I'd be hard-pressed to find, when it comes to transgenderism, I don't see any evidence that a man can magically become a woman. It just doesn't work that way. There are people who are intersex, and that they're intersex. I mean, that's science. They're intersex, right? And they're, what do you say? There's nothing else to say. That's a fact. Okay, but it is propagating a fiction to suggest that Caitlyn Jenner can become a woman. Caitlyn Jenner can never become a woman. Okay, I watched my wife give birth twice. Caitlyn Jenner will never do that. Caitlyn Jenner is not a woman. Okay, Caitlyn Jenner is not capable of being a woman. Caitlyn Jenner is a man with who's living in a really difficult situation. I feel terrible for him. But that does not mean that I'm going to tell lies to children about whether you can identify as a member of the opposite sex. And number one, live a happier life, because that is just, the depression and suicide rates in the transgender community are absolutely astronomical. And the percentage of kids who say that they're transgender when they're kids and then grow out of it as they get older is extremely high. 8 in 10 kids who say that they have transgender feelings when they're kids do not consider themselves transgender when they get older. Some consider themselves gay and lesbian, but but the vast majority of them don't stick with this. So the new civil rights push to say a 4-year-old should be able to get hormone treatment because your 4-year-old son thinks he's your 4-year-old daughter, that's a devastating evil that you're perpetrating on a child who has no capacity to make those decisions.
From what I heard today, you sound amazing. And, I'm really thankful to have come and listened to you. But I know you guys don't get along, and I know that Milo more represents what is known as the alt-right, or supposedly
yes.
represents what is, he's more so.
He sort of denies it half the time and embraces it half the time. Yeah. Because it's provocative, not.
And you know as well as I, still in particular for Pepe the Frog and all this stuff.
Yes.
So, given that there's the traditional GOP, neocons, and all those guys, and then who were supposed to be the quote-unquote revolutionaries or different people, the Tea Party, and now we have the alt-right. What do you think is going to happen to the Republican Party, and what do you think should happen to the Republican Party?
Okay, so there's so many strains of what they call the establishment. So first we have to define terms, because everybody mixes this up, right? People have said that when Ted Cruz wouldn't endorse Trump, suddenly he was establishment. That's a bunch of crap, right? He was calling Mitch McConnell a liar on the floor of the Senate. The fact is that here's how I'll give you my definitions of these various groups, and then I'll tell you how they interact. Okay? So the neocons, technically speaking, are people who used to be liberal, and in the 1960s and 70s shifted to the right. So that means that they are relatively warm toward the welfare state, but that they are very interventionist and hawkish on foreign policy, along the lines of Ronald Reagan on foreign policy. Right? That's sort of the old Urban Crystal commentary magazine thing. Then you have the people who are kind of hardcore constitutionalist conservatives. That's where I consider myself. I think it's like where Mark Levin is, probably where Ted Cruz is. And we're hawkish on foreign policy, but we're realists as opposed to we're going to go in and try and take over countries and this sort of thing. We don't think that democracy can be implanted in foreign soil without an enormous amount of time and effort. And we believe that constitutional limitations on government are the proper way of ensuring freedom. That's another wing of the Republican Party. There's the sort of blue dog Democrat side of the Republican Party, which is people who believe in bigger government but are not quite Democrats on the social side. And then there's the alt-right. So the alt-right is it's not 100% crossover, but it's kind of close. The alt-right basically believes what Pat Buchanan believes. They're isolationists on foreign policy. They believe that cultural autonomy can only be protected by protecting us ethnically. This is why the alt-right is the alt-right. So people consider themselves alt-right because they think they're doing memes. Okay, that doesn't make you alt-right. Okay, I think memes are hilarious also. But alt-right is, if you read the founders of the alt-right movement, if you read people like Box Day, who's alt-right, if you read people like Richard Spencer, who's alt-right, if you read the actual people who created the alt-right, what they will say, and Milo says it in his piece about the alt-right at Breitbart, just made so much noise. In that piece he says, these are folks who believe that race and culture are indistinct, that they are inherently connected. I think that's evil. I actually think that's evil. I don't think that race and culture are connected. I don't think that just because you're black, we can assume that you are incapable of imbibing Western civilization, or if you cross the southern border, you're incapable of imbibing Western civilization. I believe that we have to check their ideology at the door, but I don't believe that ethnicity and culture are linked. The alt-right does. And what I think Milo has done, and it's been really a problem, it's why I oppose so much of what Milo does. We agree on some things, we really disagree on this. And I think that he's done some really terrible things because of this. He has broadened the definition of alt-right to try and suck people into warmth toward these ideas under the guise of, well, it's all just frivolous joviality. Okay? And a lot of it isn't. A lot of it isn't. Okay? The roots of the alt-right movement are really egregiously bad. And also, I have to say that Milo's take on political correctness is quite stupid. His take on political correctness is that political correctness should be thought by simply breaking every taboo. This is Milo's perspective, right? And so that's why he thinks it's mischievous and trolly when you send people gas chamber names, right? And listen, I've gotten a lot of it this last year. And the Anti-Defamation League labeled me the #1 recipient of journalistic anti-Semitism in the United States this year. There were 20,000 anti-Semitic tweets sent between March and September. I was the personal recipient of 8,000 of them. And I've received literally dozens of death threats. I've gotten threats on my phone. All of this is coming from the mischievous, trolly people who Milo likes to incentivize. And Milo's not responsible for bad people doing bad things, but he is responsible for giving them a feeling of community and a feeling of mainstreaming them. That's what I object to. What political correctness is bad, and why it's bad, is because it forbids us from saying true things that need to be said in order to make society a better place. Right? So, for example, I think it's politically incorrect for me to talk so much about single motherhood. It's politically incorrect. People get offended. That's useful, because people have to say it. It is not politically incorrect for Donald Trump to say grab him by the booty. Right? Donald Trump defines that as politically incorrect because it's something people don't say. But things people don't say and politically correct are not the same thing. Right? Sometimes you're just being an asshole. So the problem that I see with Milo's perspective on this is that if you're just being a teenage jackass, that does not mean that you're pushing the ball forward in any real substantive way toward making the world a better place. Like, I'm glad people